The cold September air at Dover Port, one of Britain's busiest gateways to Europe. Trucks roll off the ferries and lorries pile high, but today it's far from a normal day for the British Border Force. Their eyes are locked on crates of bananas from Ecuador. Everything seems normal, but not for the British Border Force agents who move quickly, their eyes fixed on the crates of bananas from Ecuador. As they rummage through the shipment, one of the officers' hands stops. Hidden beneath a few rows of fruit, tightly packed plastic wrapped packages emerge. Within moments, the call goes out. High purity coke, a near ton of it. The street value? £76 million. As the agents cut open more boxes, the scale of the bust becomes clear. This is no ordinary shipment. This is the shipment that will bring down the UK's most wanted, a gangster named Jamie Stevenson, who's better known as the Iceman. Who is this man, and what did he do to get a 20-year sentence? Let's find out. Jamie Stevenson was born in Glasgow and raised in the tough Red Road flats, a place known for its harsh environment and hard-edged residents. Growing up in the infamous schemes of Bar Mulloch and Monkland Street in Townhead, Stevenson was no stranger to the gritty realities of Glasgow's underworld, where notorious gangs like the Calton Tongs ruled the streets. Put his propensity for violent confrontation in the mix, and you have a gangster swiftly ascending the city's criminal hierarchy. His willingness to use a knife at a minor disagreement made him someone to avoid. This was the start of the making of the Iceman. By the time he reached adulthood, Stevenson had already built a reputation for his ruthlessness. His early criminal activities were marked with an eagerness to assert dominance and control, making him a feared figure in the local streets. His reputation soon caught the attention of more established criminal figures, and he became closely associated with the McGovern family, a powerful crime clan in Springburn, just 2 miles from his childhood home. The McGoverns were one of the most feared families in Glasgow's underworld, and their influence was significant. Stevenson, through his connections with Tony McGovern, found himself intertwined with one of the most powerful groups operating in the city. Stevenson's relationship with Tony McGovern went beyond criminal dealings. They were close friends, serving as best men at each other's weddings. This bond, however, was not enough to keep their partnership intact, as tensions within the criminal organisation began to mount. The McGoverns, especially Tony's brother Tommy McGovern, became entangled in disputes with Liverpool narcotics suppliers, refusing to pay for a consignment. This growing rift between the McGoverns and their suppliers also caught Stevenson in the mix, who agreed to peace talks but was ambushed and hit at point-blank range. He survived the attack, which meant only one thing: this feud was far from being over. Revenge was inevitable for the McGoverns, and it came in the year 2000 when Tony McGovern was gunned down outside the New Morven Bar in Glasgow, a notorious spot where more than one bloody feud has come to a violent end. Despite wearing a Kevlar vest, he was pronounced dead shortly after the attack. Stevenson was charged with executing his best man, but the case was dropped due to a lack of evidence. The execution remains unsolved to this day. But the underworld knows there was only one suspect for McGovern's elimination: his former best friend, Jamie Iceman Stevenson. A source told newspaper Daily Record, Stevenson felt bad about Tony but said, "If you walk in the jungle, you better be ready to bump into a tiger. The gangland is crazy for sure. Friends can turn foes within seconds, and death is the only outcome of it." To send a clear message, Stevenson followed the other members of the McGovern family, photographing their movements and circulating the images to his network. Stevenson had taken charge, and no one could deny it. Stevenson's nickname, Iceman, originated from his cold, emotionless demeanour in the face of danger, especially as his reputation for orchestrating violent reprisals grew. As noted in The Iceman, The Rise and Fall of a Crime Lord by Russell Findlay and Jim Wilson, Stevenson was not the type to show remorse. He operated with calculating precision, making him an ideal enforcer in the early stages of his criminal career. His methodical approach to violence, coupled with his calm exterior, earned him the nickname that would stick with him for life. Stevenson's rise through the ranks of organised crime was swift. He moved from being a feared enforcer to a mastermind of more sophisticated criminal operations. His early reputation for violence was complemented by his growing involvement in large-scale narcotic trafficking and money laundering. His cold-blooded efficiency in dealing with threats and rivals made him a formidable force in the Glasgow underworld, while his connections with other criminal figures helped him expand his operations beyond the city. In the years following the McGovern feud, Stevenson became a pivotal figure in Scotland's criminal landscape. His growing reputation as a violent yet calculating operator made him one of the most feared and respected figures in the underworld. As he continued to ascend, his operations became more intricate, setting the stage for his future ventures. Stevenson's early years in crime, marked by violence and power struggles, laid the foundation for his criminal empire he would later build. His connections to key players in Glasgow's underworld and his ability to survive and thrive in such a hostile environment established him as a dominant figure in Scotland's organised crime. Stevenson's ascent in the criminal world isn't just due to his willingness to engage in violence, it was his ability to connect with key figures in the city's criminal ecosystem that accelerated his rise. He was known for being methodical and emotionless in handling conflict, making him a valuable asset to the criminal operations he was involved in. Even in the early 2000s, he was a major player in Scotland's criminal underworld. His rise was not just due to his connections with the McGoverns, but also his strategic thinking and ability to execute large-scale operations. Stevenson's criminal foundations were built on a combination of violence, loyalty, and ambition, qualities that would continue to drive his criminal career as he moved into even more dangerous and profitable ventures. While the McGoverns were instrumental in his early rise, Stevenson was no longer reliant on their network. He had developed his own empire, one that would soon attract the full attention of authorities across the UK. By the time Stevenson started establishing himself as a key figure in the organised crime world, he had already developed the skills and connections that would later be used to build his international narcotic trafficking operations. The alliances he formed in his early years, combined with his strategic expansion into new territories, set the stage for his future ventures and his eventual place on the UK's most wanted list. By 2007, Jamie Stevenson had cemented his status as a key player in Scotland's organised crime scene, with illicit trade and money laundering at the heart of his enterprise. However, his growing wealth and influence caught the authorities' attention. The Scottish Crime and Drug Enforcement Agency initiated Operation Folklore, one of the most significant investigations into organised crime in the country at the time. The goal was to dismantle Stevenson's criminal operations by targeting the financial network that sustained them. The operation was quite meticulous and multifaceted, involving the use of electronic surveillance, undercover officers, and forensic accounting. The investigation relied heavily on hidden microphones and listening devices planted in Stevenson's home and other locations linked to his operations. These devices captured crucial conversations between Stevenson and his associates, including discussions about laundering the proceeds from his narcotic trafficking ventures. Months of surveillance allowed the coppers to map out the structure of Stevenson's laundering network, which revolved around funneling illicit profits through legitimate-looking businesses. One of Stevens' key methods was using a taxi company as a front to launder narcotic money. The SCDEA was able to track his attempts to set up the firm, which was designed to blend legitimate earnings with illegal funds. The forensic accounting conducted during the operation was essential in tracing nearly £1 million in narcotic money. Investigators followed the movement of cash between accounts, the purchase of luxury goods and large cash deposits, all linked back to Stevenson's criminal enterprise. During Operation Folklore, the authorities seized 55 luxury watches worth over £300,000, along with nearly £600,000 in cash. These assets were clear indicators of the immense wealth Stevenson had accumulated through his illegal activities. Judge Lord Hodge, who presided over the case at the High Court in Glasgow, described Stevenson's role in the criminal underworld. "It is clear that you occupy an important position in the world of organised crime." Hodge emphasised the significance of Stevenson's money laundering activities, stating that money laundering provides an essential service to the narcotics trade and contributes materially to its profitability. The SCDEA's investigation also highlighted Stevenson's attempt to mask his wealth and maintain a low profile through the purchase of high-value items and businesses. His stepson, Jerry Carbin, played a central role in the operation, acting as one of Stevenson's trusted lieutenants. Carbin, along with Stevenson, was convicted for his part in laundering criminal proceeds. Their operation was vast, and the use of forensic financial tracking was key to unravelling the complex web of transactions designed to obscure the illegal origins of their funds. Stevenson was jailed for over 12 years, marking the longest ever sentence imposed in Scotland for money laundering. Stevenson's arrest in 2006 was the result of months of intensive work by the SCDEA. The evidence against him, gathered through wiretaps and financial analysis, was overwhelming. When the case went to trial in 2007, both Stevenson and Carbin pleaded guilty to the charges. Stevenson's guilty plea underscored the strength of the case built against him. However, despite the severity of the sentence, Stevenson's imprisonment was only a temporary setback. He served less than 6 years of his 12-year sentence, being released in 2014. Imagine the frustration of authorities who work day and night to put him behind bars. You think the laws should tighten, at least for narcotic traffickers, or should the law be soft on anyone who cooperates with the authorities during incarceration? The early release was a blow to the coppers, who knew that Stevenson would return to the criminal world upon regaining his freedom. His time in prison provided an opportunity to recalibrate and adjust his operations, making him more cautious in his future dealings. Nevertheless, Operation Folklore was undoubtedly a raging success. Graham Pearson, the then Director General of the SCDEA, reflected on the importance of Stevenson's conviction, stating that Stevenson had, for many decades now, been a very senior figure in organised crime and ran his businesses in much the same way as the Sopranos run their businesses shown on television. The conviction dealt a significant blow to Stevenson's operations, but it did not dismantle it entirely. While the SCDEA's investigation managed to bring Stevenson to justice for his money laundering activities, it was evident that this was just one facet of his broader criminal operation. After being released from prison in 2014, Jamie Stevenson wasted no time in re-establishing himself within Scotland's criminal underworld. Despite serving time for money laundering, Stevenson's network and influence remained largely intact. Upon his release, he quickly resumed his involvement in organised crime, focusing heavily on the lucrative trade of narcotic trafficking, which had become his speciality. Stevenson became more strategic in how he structured his dealings, using intermediaries and legitimate businesses to cloak his illegal activities from the government. One of his key moves in this new phase was entering the international narcotic trade at a much larger scale than before. His criminal enterprise now stretched beyond Scotland's borders, involving high-level contacts in South America, Spain, and across the UK. He started a sophisticated narcotic smuggling operation involving nearly a ton of coke concealed within shipments of bananas from Ecuador. Interestingly, bananas and narcotics go hand in hand. Because of their perishability, they pass through customs quickly and smoothly, which makes it an ideal facade for narcotic smuggling. Without knowing, bananas became the ultimate accomplice to illicit trade, imparting it the name of narco bananas. But this impressive operation was brought down by another impressive operation named Operation Pepperoni, which would ultimately lead to Stevenson's downfall. Before we delve into it, let's first look at the smuggling plan in detail. The plan was to smuggle the illicit product into the UK using a legitimate front, the Glasgow Fruit Market Limited, a company that appeared on the surface to be a legitimate importer of fresh produce. This company was run by David Bilsland, an unfortunate partner of Stevenson, who played a pivotal role in providing the appearance of legitimacy to the entire operation. The logistics behind the coke smuggling plot was complex and carefully coordinated. Stevenson, working behind the scenes, used his vast network of criminal contacts to organise the shipment. The coke, sourced from Ecuador, was packed into boxes of bananas destined for Glasgow Fruit Market Limited. The bananas were shipped via standard commercial routes, entering the UK through the port of Dover. Stevenson's role was predominantly one of coordination. He managed the flow of information between his South American suppliers and his UK-based contacts. David Bilsland was the front man with his fruit import business as a cover for the operation. The sheer scale of the smuggling plot, nearly a ton of coke, shocked even the authorities. However, they received intelligence in 2018 that a Glasgow fruit merchant, David Bilsland, had links to organised crime and was trying to further his business interests in South America. Operation Pepperoni was launched. Now, the name has nothing to do with the context. It was picked at random. Bilsland was planning to import consignments of bananas from Ecuador, close to the coke-producing countries of Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia. Experts told the Pepperoni team that it was a loss leader. Only supermarkets could turn a profit by bringing bananas in from South America. In February 2020, the British authorities and the NCA became aware that Bilsland was making an unusually brief visit to Spain, flying out on Valentine's Day and coming back the next. He wasn't taking bags, and it was assessed to be a criminal matter. They didn't know who Bilsland was going to meet, but at the request of the NCA, Spanish police secretly photographed two men at Alicante Melia Hotel and sent the pictures back to Scotland. Bilsland was with none other than Jamie Stevenson. This proved to be a jackpot for the authorities. Detective Chief Superintendent Ferry said, "It was a relief that we knew who he was meeting." That kicked the investigation into a different level. Around this point, two different aspects of the case began to converge. Through conventional intelligence gathering, the security forces learned that Stevenson had been involved in setting up a pill factory, which was churning out millions of etzizolam tablets in Rochester in Kent. Stevenson's use of encrypted communications was a crucial element of his strategy. Like many high-level criminals, he relied on the now infamous EncroChat, a highly secure messaging platform that was favoured by organised crime figures across Europe. Using handles like Elusiveel and Big Tasty, Stevenson communicated with his associates regarding the logistics of the smuggling operation. However, in April 2020, French authorities managed to infiltrate the EncroChat system, giving authorities across Europe unprecedented access to the inner workings of numerous organised crime groups. The breakthrough provided a snapshot in time of criminal operations and included tens of thousands of lines of data from Stevenson's communications. The National Crime Agency and Police Scotland were able to piece together critical information that led to the unravelling of the coke smuggling plot. EncroChat data showed how Stevenson and his associates had meticulously planned the importation of the narcotics, including details about the shipments and their movements across borders. Jerry McLean, regional head of investigations at the NCA, noted the sophistication of the operation. Jamie Stevenson is familiar with law enforcement, and law enforcement is familiar with him, but it was really quite a surprise that it was him and his wider network. He was operating at that top table and had good international contacts. McLean also emphasised the scale of the operation. Using the importation of fruit as a cover, originating in Ecuador and moving through various points into the UK, this would have required the degree of sophistication and international networks and contacts. But how did it all spiral into Stevenson's exposure to the authorities?
The plot was foiled and it all came crashing down in 2020 for Stevenson and his accomplices when Border Force officials intercepted the boxes and seized them. Inside, they found 119 blocks of cocaine with a purity of almost 80%. Then the hunt for the gangsters began. Authorities eventually cracked an encrypted messaging platform where Stevenson and his accomplices were boasting of life-changing sums of cash. He was eventually arrested while he was jogging in the Netherlands. The man dubbed Scotland's version of Tony Soprano also ran a street Valium pill factory, churning out 250,000 tablets an hour. He and 5 others have eventually been jailed.
The critical moment in Operation Pepperoni came in September 2020, when a suspicious shipment of bananas arrived at the port of Dover. Border Force officers, acting on intelligence gathered from EncroChat, conducted a thorough search of the shipment. Hidden within the crates of bananas, officers discovered nearly a ton of coke, packed into 119 foil-wrapped packages. The street value of this seized product was estimated to be £76 million, making it one of the largest narcotic busts in recent UK history. The seizure of the coke represented a significant blow to Stevenson's operation, and the loss of such a large quantity of narcotics was a major financial setback. The NCA and Police Scotland quickly moved to arrest those involved in the smuggling plot. David Bilsland, who had been instrumental in arranging the logistics of the shipments, was arrested and later admitted to his role in the conspiracy. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for his involvement in the smuggling operation. Stevenson, however, managed to evade immediate capture. Following the seizure of the coke shipment, he went on the run, fleeing the UK. His flight from justice was short-lived, however, as he was arrested in early 2022 while jogging in the Netherlands. His arrest marked the end of Operation Pepperoni, which had exposed his involvement in one of the largest coke smuggling operations in Scotland's history. Deputy Prosecutor Fiscal Corrins, who was involved in the prosecution of the case, described the operation as monumental in its scale. Jamie Stevenson and his gang were involved in major narcotic trafficking on an industrial and global scale, she said, emphasising that successful infiltration of the EncroChat was a pivotal moment in building the case against Stevenson and his associates. Now, let's come to the second strand of this case, the etzizolam factory producing and supplying street diazepam. In June 2020, authorities discovered a pill factory in Rochester, Kent, producing etzizolam, commonly known as street Valium. The factory was part of Stevenson's sprawling criminal enterprise and was responsible for producing a staggering 28 million etzizolam tablets. The scale of this operation was industrial, with millions of tablets manufactured and distributed, contributing to the rampant narcotic problem in Scotland. The Kent Pill Factory's discovery was the result of an extensive investigation by the National Crime Agency and Police Scotland. both of whom were working as part of Operation Veniti, a broader effort to crack down on organised crime following the infiltration of the EncroChat network. The encrypted messaging platform had been a crucial tool for Stevenson and his associates to communicate securely about their illegal operations. However, the French authorities' successful infiltration of EncroChat provided authorities in different countries with a treasure trove of evidence, including communications that directly linked Stevenson to the Etzizolam production operation. The raid on the factory revealed the scale and sophistication of the operation. Authorities found machinery capable of producing millions of pills, vast quantities of raw materials, and packaged pills ready for distribution. The 28 million Etzizolam tablets seized were destined for the streets, where they would have contributed to the growing narcotic epidemic. In messages exchanged on EncroChat, Stevenson and his network discussed the logistics of the shipments, production distribution, and the anticipated profits. He was unguarded in his discussions, fully confident that his encrypted conversations could not be accessed by authorities. One associate even commented to Stevenson that the coke operation would bring in life-changing profits. Stevenson's arrogance was further highlighted by his decision to send a picture of his driving license through EncroChat, which ultimately helped the coppers confirm his identity on the platform. The breadth of Stevenson's operations became clear through these decrypted messages. His use of encrypted communication extended beyond his dealings in the UK. It revealed his international network, connecting him to criminal contacts in Spain, South America, and other parts of Europe. This network was critical for sourcing the vast quantities of narcotics that Stevenson was moving into the UK, particularly from Ecuador, where his supplies originated. The EncroChat messages also exposed his coordination with other key figures in his criminal enterprise, such as Lloyd Cross, who was integral in the running of Etzizolam pill factory in Kent. Cross, known as Shaggy Goat on EncroChat, worked closely with Stevenson to ensure the smooth production and distribution of millions of Etzizolam tablets. The infiltration of EncroChat also exposed other vulnerabilities within Stevenson's network, particularly in how he managed the fallout from failed operations. The seizure of the coke shipment at Dover was a financial disaster for Stevenson, but it also had ripple effects on his partners. The businessman involved in the financing of the smuggling operation suffered heavy financial losses. According to sources, the associate had already invested millions into the venture, and the failure to deliver the coke meant that South American narcotic cartels were still expecting payment for the lost shipment, putting the businessman into a dangerous position. As the investigation progressed, the volume of evidence gathered from EncroChat proved overwhelming. After the seizure of nearly a ton of coke hidden in banana shipments at the port of Dover, and the subsequent discovery of the Etzizolam pill factory in Kent in June 2020, Jamie Stevenson found himself facing the most significant crackdown of his operations yet. Knowing the weight of evidence accumulated against him, Stevenson did what many top criminals in his position would. He fled. His escape from the UK occurred shortly after his release on bail following the Etzizolam factory raid. Despite the severity of the charges he was facing, Stevenson's release gave him the opportunity to disappear. For 18 months he managed to evade capture, making use of his extensive international connections. His flight from justice, however, only served to increase the pressure from the authorities, and in January 2022, Stevenson was officially included in a public appeal as one of the UK's most wanted men. The National Crime Agency and Police Scotland, working in tandem, launched a cross-border manhunt for Stevenson. His escape was not a matter of simply fleeing the UK. Stevenson was a known figure in Europe, with strong connections in Spain and other parts of the continent, where organised crime networks often found refuge. The appeal made it clear that Stevenson was a dangerous individual, with Jerry McLean, the NCA's regional head of investigations, stating, "Stevenson is one of Scotland's most wanted fugitives. He knows we're looking for him in connection with organised crime on both sides of the border." McLean's statement emphasised the cross-border nature of Stevenson's criminal activities and the urgency with which authorities were pursuing him. Stevenson's flight was coordinated, but it was not without significant risks. His involvement in high-stakes illicit deals and his connections to South American cartels meant that his escape from the UK also carried dangerous financial repercussions for some of his business associates. One such associate, a businessman believed to have financed a large portion of the coke smuggling plot, was left significantly out of pocket after the failed shipment. Although his identity remained concealed, it was reported that he had invested millions into the venture, and despite the bust, the South American cartels still expected payment for their lost products. Stevens' eventual capture came in February 2022, when he was arrested in the southern municipality of Bergen op Zoom in the Netherlands. The arrest itself was almost anticlimactic. Stevenson was caught while jogging, unaware that he was being watched by Dutch authorities. According to reports, the NCA, Dutch National Police and Police Scotland had been conducting surveillance on Stevenson for some time before making their move. When they finally decided to strike, it was in broad daylight, and Stevenson was taken into custody without a struggle. Stevenson's capture brought an end to his time on the run, but it also demonstrated the determination of the authorities to pursue him across borders and bring him back to face justice. Following his arrest, Stevenson was extradited back to the UK to face trial for his crimes. His capture was seen as a major turning point in the investigation, not only because it removed one of Scotland's most dangerous criminals from the streets, but also it reinforced the global nature of the fight against organised crime. Stevenson's reliance on international contacts had allowed him to flee the UK, but it was the same international network of authorities that ultimately brought him back. The extradition process was swift, and within weeks of his capture, Stevenson was back on British soil awaiting trial. His time on the run had come to an end, and the extensive evidence gathered from Operation Veniti and EncroChat would now be used to secure his conviction. His flight from justice, while prolonging the inevitable, only highlighted the international reach of his criminal operations and the length to which authorities were willing to go to ensure he faced accountability for his actions. In 2024, after some time of evading capture, complex criminal operations and numerous legal entanglements, Jamie Stevenson finally faced the full weight of justice. His trial at the High Court in Glasgow was one of the most significant organised crime cases Scotland had seen, bringing to an end a career of orchestrating vast narcotic trafficking operations. Stevenson initially denied the numerous charges against him, maintaining his innocence as the trial commenced. Prosecutor Alex Prentice QC led the case against Stevenson. As the trial unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the evidence against Stevenson was overwhelming. His criminal network, which spanned across multiple countries and involved a complex web of associates, had been laid bare. Realising that his legal defence was crumbling under the weight of evidence, Stevenson made a dramatic shift. 3 days into the trial, he changed his plea to guilty, admitting to the charges of directing serious organised crime. The guilty plea was a significant moment in the trial. Stevenson's stepson, Gerard Carbin, and other key players like Lloyd Cross, David Bilsland, Paul Bowes, and Ryan McPhee were all implicated in the criminal enterprise and faced their own sentences for their roles in the organisation. The sentencing of Jamie Stevenson was presided over by Judge Lord Ericht, who did not hold back in his final remarks. Here's what he had to say.
You directed a complex operation for the importation and supply of cocaine. The operation involved cash being provided by you to fund Mr. Bilsland's apparently legitimate imports. It also involved removing Mr. Bilsland as company director of Glasgow Fruit Market Limited and registering as a director in his place the name of a vulnerable individual who allowed his signature and identity to be used without having any knowledge of the operation. Messages show you discussing with Mr. Cross the importation of kilo blocks of cocaine. They also show you discussing the use of Mr. Bilsland and his business experience and contacts to provide the appearance of legitimacy.
In sentencing Stevenson, Judge Ericht delivered a firm message, stating that a prison term of 20 years was fair and proportionate, given the gravity of the crimes committed. The National Crime Agency's Jerry McLean, who had overseen much of the investigation, reflected on the significance of the case, stating, Jamie Stevenson and his organised crime group are now where they belong, thanks to the very long and tenacious investigations by officers from the NCA, Police Scotland and the Metropolitan Police. McLean emphasised the harm caused by Stevenson's criminal activities. Offenders who traffic and peddle drugs around the UK don't care at all about the harm they bring to our communities. They don't care about the lives that are destroyed by addiction. The trial and sentencing of Stevenson and his co-conspirators marked the conclusion of a 4-year-long investigation that had uncovered one of the most significant narcotic trafficking operations in the UK. The meticulous work of authorities, combined with the breakthrough provided by the infiltration of EncroChat, had brought down one of Scotland's most notorious criminals. As Stevenson was led away to begin his sentence, the final chapter of his decades-long involvement in organised crime came to a close. But for the law and communities affected by his actions, his downfall represented a crucial victory in the fight against organised crime. However, It looks like the Iceman wouldn't give up without a fight. It has recently turned out that he will appeal against the jail sentence. A judge will now consider whether an appeal can be heard or not. Jerry McLean, the NCA's regional head of investigations, commented on the success of the operation. Jamie Stevenson was operating at the top table of organised crime in Scotland, and taking him down represents a significant blow to the criminal infrastructure that has caused so much harm to our communities. McLean emphasised the far-reaching effects of Stevenson's operations, stating, "Offenders like Stevenson don't care about the harm they bring to our communities. His arrest has undoubtedly saved lives by cutting off the supply of dangerous drugs like coke and etizolam." The ramifications of Stevenson's conviction extend beyond the immediate disruption of his network. It also sent a strong message to other criminal organisations in Scotland and the UK that the government was committed to targeting high-level organised crime figures. In the months following Stevenson's arrest and conviction, authorities continued to dismantle elements of his network and pursue other criminals who had been involved in his operations. While the immediate impact in the illicit trade was significant, coppers cautioned that organised crime is resilient and that new figures would eventually step in to fill the void left by Stevenson's downfall. Nevertheless, the conviction of a criminal as influential as Stevenson represented a major victory in the ongoing fight against narcotic trafficking in the UK. The collapse of Stevenson's empire also highlighted the importance of international cooperation in tackling organised crime. Stevenson's capture in the Netherlands, coordinated by Dutch authorities, the NCA and Police Scotland, underscored the need for cross-border efforts in apprehending high-profile criminals who operate across multiple jurisdictions. The ability of the government to track Stevenson's movements and bring him back to the UK for trial demonstrated the effectiveness of these partnerships in targeting international crime networks. While Stevenson's conviction was a major success, officials were clear that there was still much work to be done. The demand for narcotics in the UK remains high, and organised crime groups continue to seek new ways to exploit this demand. However, Stevenson's downfall serves as a reminder that even the most sophisticated criminal figures are not untouchable. The use of technology, international collaboration, and persistent investigations ultimately led to the collapse of one of the most powerful criminal empires in Scotland's history. In the words of Sineadine Corrins, Deputy Prosecutor Fiscal, who worked closely on the case, "These convictions are monumental. Jamie Stevenson and his criminal gang were involved in drug trafficking on an industrial and a global scale. It is also a marker from law enforcement and the criminal justice system in Scotland. Collaboratively, all the preparation and effort brought this serious organised crime gang into the dock at the High Court. The evidence was presented in a way that was absolutely watertight." Stevenson's downfall marked a major turning point in the fight against organised crime in Scotland. His conviction did not just remove a single figure from the criminal landscape, it struck at the heart of a criminal infrastructure that had facilitated the flow of narcotics and laundered millions in illegal profits. The long-term consequences of his capture will continue to reverberate through Scotland's criminal underworld for years to come. The rise and fall of Jamie Stevenson, from a notorious Glasgow criminal to an international narcotic trafficker, reveals the intricate web of power, influence, and brutality that shaped his empire. His eventual capture and conviction signalled not only the collapse of one of Scotland's most formidable crime networks, but also highlighted the lengths authorities will go to dismantle organised crime. Yet, even as Stevenson's empire crumbled, the demand for narcotics persists, and new figures continue to emerge from the shadows. The question remains, in the never-ending battle between authorities and organised crime, can there ever truly be a final victory?